Writing. The day we both came to propose. The woman standing on my doorstep was holding a ring box in one hand and covering her mouth with the other, as if she had just seen a ghost. I was standing inside the doorway holding my own ring box, completely frozen. For several seconds, neither of us moved. We simply stared at each other, realizing the impossible truth at exactly the same moment. We had both come to ask the same question. Her name was Emma, and for the past 6 years, she had been the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. We had met in college when she accidentally took my seat during an orientation lecture and then spent the next hour insisting that I had taken hers. What started as an argument became a friendship, and that friendship slowly became the safest part of both our lives. We studied together, celebrated birthdays together, survived terrible jobs together, and somehow remained close even when everything else around us changed. But there was one thing we never talked about directly. Feelings. The possibility that our friendship might be something more. We were both too afraid that saying it aloud would destroy the one relationship neither of us could imagine losing. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that sometimes the right person is closer than we realize, please like this story, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. A year earlier, Emma had moved to another city for work. We promised that distance wouldn't change anything, and for the most part, it didn't. We still called each other almost every evening. Sometimes we talked for hours, sometimes only for 5 minutes, but neither of us ever ended a day without checking in. I told myself that was simply what best friends did. I ignored the strange emptiness I felt whenever she wasn't around. Then, one winter evening, Emma called me crying. Her relationship had ended after months of problems. She told me she felt foolish for believing it would work. I didn't know how to fix her heartbreak, so I did the only thing I could. I listened. I reminded her that being left by someone didn't mean she was difficult to love. I told her that the right person wouldn't make her question whether she mattered. There was a long silence after that. She quietly asked whether I believed someone could spend years loving a person without realizing it. I said yes. Neither of us said anything else. A few months later, I started seeing someone. She was kind, intelligent, and wonderful, and I thought perhaps this was the proof I needed that my feelings for Emma were nothing more than friendship. But every time something good happened, I wanted to tell Emma first. Every difficult day made me wish she were sitting beside me. And when my relationship eventually ended, the person I called was Emma. That was when I finally stopped lying to myself. I loved her. Not because she was perfect. She wasn't. She could be stubborn, impatient, and absolutely terrible at admitting when she was wrong. But she knew when I was pretending to be okay. She remembered tiny details I had forgotten telling her. She could walk into a room after months apart and somehow make it feel like home. Still, I was terrified. What if she didn't feel the same? What if I confessed everything and lost her forever? So I waited. And apparently, so did she. On the morning of her birthday, I drove across town and bought a simple ring. I didn't want something enormous or expensive. I wanted something that felt like her, beautiful without needing to prove anything. I spent the entire afternoon practicing what I would say. Every version sounded wrong. By evening, I stood outside her apartment and realized I couldn't do it. I went home. The next morning, I received a message from Emma saying she was coming to see me. She wouldn't explain why. I had no idea she had spent the previous night making the same decision. She had bought a ring too. She had spent months thinking about what our friendship meant to her. She had watched me move through relationships, heartbreaks, successes, and failures. She had slowly realized that whenever she imagined her future, I was always somewhere inside it. So that afternoon, she drove to my house. And I was waiting at the door. When she saw the ring box in my hand, her eyes widened. Then she looked down at the ring box she was holding. For a moment, we both laughed. It wasn't the nervous laughter of strangers. It was the laughter of two people who had spent years being afraid of the exact same thing. I stepped outside and sat beside her on the front steps. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend the moment was simple. We talked about every fear we had carried for years. We admitted that we had both wondered about us but were terrified of damaging what we already had. Then Emma told me something that changed everything. She said she hadn't come because she was certain everything would work out. She had come because she finally understood that not knowing was worse than taking the chance. That sentence gave me the courage I had been missing. I told her that I didn't want to choose her because I was afraid of being alone. I wanted to choose her because life had already shown me what it felt like to have her beside me, and I couldn't imagine building a future without that friendship, trust, and understanding. She smiled through her tears. Then she opened the ring box. I opened mine too. We both realized that neither of us had actually planned the ceremony, the celebration, or even what would happen after the question was answered. But maybe that was okay. Some of life's most important moments don't arrive perfectly organized. Sometimes they arrive unexpectedly, standing on your doorstep. We eventually told our families. Some were surprised. Others admitted they had suspected it for years. Emma's mother laughed and said that everyone except the two of us had apparently known what was happening. Our wedding months later wasn't extravagant. We didn't need a ballroom filled with strangers. We wanted the people who had watched us grow, struggle, fail, and find our way back to each other. Before the ceremony began, Emma and I stood apart, waiting for the moment when we would finally walk toward each other. And I realized something. The ring hadn't changed our relationship. The wedding hadn't changed it either. The only thing that changed was that we finally stopped being afraid of calling our love by its real name. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And if you know someone who is afraid to take a second chance on something meaningful, send this story to them. Before the ending, leave a comment saying, "Take the chance," if you believe some of the best chapters of our lives begin when we finally find the courage to be honest. Because that day, two people stood at one doorstep carrying two different ring boxes. We had spent years believing love might destroy our friendship. Instead, we discovered that sometimes the strongest love is the one that begins with friendship, grows through patience, survives distance, and waits quietly until two people are finally brave enough to choose each other. And that was the day we stopped wondering what might have happened. And finally began finding out.